Chapter 27, attaching pronominal suffixes to the verb. And first we're going to work with the perfect, attaching pronominal suffixes to the perfect. This is a difficult chapter. This is a Hebrew major leaguer here. And so you're going to have to study this chapter with great diligence. And you'll probably have to go over it a few times because, again, this is one of the more difficult chapters in the book. Of course, there's two ways you can express a direct object in Hebrew. One way, as you've already learned, is you can attach something like an et particle and put that in front of a direct object. And of course, as you know, if it's not a definite direct object, you don't have to have the et. You would be without it, and it would be probably an indefinite word. But yet there's another way, and that's what we're going to cover in this chapter, and that is you can connect a pronominal suffix directly on the verb. And that's what we want to examine in this chapter. So now if you'd look at chapter 27, section 2, the first thing we have to do is we have to know certain things about proto-forms again. Because when they attach pronominal suffixes onto verbs, the verbs have to revert back to their proto-form. Many of the proto-forms are identical to what you're used to looking at, but we do have to take a look at a few of them. And the first thing we want to do, though, is talk about the vowels. And so let's take a typical verb, katal, like this. Of course, these typical standard verbs, the proto-vowel is going to be a patach as your thematic. And then under R1, it's also going to be patach. And so that's the typical vowels. But if you were to have a stative verb, with a stative verb, as you know, it looks like something like this, kaved. This would go back to a hirik, of course, the short hirik. And then, of course, the kametz again would go back to patach. So we want to keep that in mind. And in the stative, we're only talking about the 3ms. If you were to do a 1cs, again, it would be a patach. But most stative verbs do not take a lot of pronominal suffixes on them, and that's the good news for that. So anyway, for the vowels, basically it's patachs under perfects. The next thing we want to do is look at the 2fs form. The 2fs form looks like katalt. And really there was a vowel here originally. It was a short vowel, and Hebrew had a tendency to drop all final short vowels. And so what was a hirik there was dropped. But when we add pronominal suffixes, we bring the hirik back, but we actually are going to lengthen it to a hirik yod. And so this will be the protoform if we just change this vowel to a patach. This would be the protoform that we're going to use to attach pronominal suffixes to a second feminine singular perfect call. If you go down now to number 3, the 3fs. Well, the 3fs, as you're used to seeing it, is katala. But as you know from the nouns, if you remember Torah, the real feminine form was torat. And so we're going to have that same true feminine T here in the verb also. And so the vocal schwa, obviously, we're going to take it back to a patach. The kametz, we're going to take back to a patach. And then we're going to bring back the old feminine T with the patach under R3. And again, this is something that you should remember from working with the nouns and the feminine nouns and so forth that ended in kametz as well. So this will be the protoform for your 3fs. And now one more protoform we need to know, and that's for your second masculine plural. The form you're used to seeing looks like kataltem. But what we're going to do for the protoform is, of course, we'll take the vocal schwa and restore the patach. And then we're going to have a shurik. We're going to get rid of the mem and the segol into the tav and put a shurik. And this will be our protoform. And as I tell you in the notes, if you ever study Aramaic, you'll see that these forms are quite related. And so there's a real connection between the two. So the first thing is you have to know these protoforms. And if you know those protoforms, you're going to be in good shape. Now, again, if you take like a 1CS protoform, which of course I've not listed it here, Again, you have a historic long vowel there. You have the patach, that's fine, short vowel. And then the long comets, that would be under R1, you simply make a patach. So for the other forms, I think you'll have no problems reconstructing the protoforms. Okay, in section 3 now, we come to the accent and vowel reduction pattern. And the first thing you need to know is all third persons, and that's your 3MS, 3FS, and 3CP, accent the third root letter. And in the example I give you, here is your root. Your root is shamar, the shin, the mem, and the resh. And now you're attaching a pronominal suffix. And so in a situation like this, the R3 will take the accent. And so all third persons are accented over R3. So you've got to remember that. There is one exception. If you have a 3MS verb with a 2MS, you're going to have a change here. The reason you cannot accent R3 here is you can never accent vocal schwa. And so the accent will actually go over the pronominal suffix, as you see here. You need to get a little method there. Okay. And then for the rest of the forms, you're going to accent either the tav or the noon of that sufformative element. And so the noon is obviously for your 1CP. You would put the accent here. And then the tav for all the other forms, like for instance, let's say a 2MS. You know, it ends with a ta like this, so you would accent there. So again, keep that in mind. And now the vowel reduction pattern. And for the call perfect, the reduction pattern is like a noun reduction pattern. And when I say that, it's going to follow the rules of chapter 6 that we've been using for all this time. We're going to use them again. We're going to consider these verbs, these perfect verbs that have pronominal suffixes, they're just like nouns. And so once we establish the accent, we'll crunch the rules that you see in chapter 6. And so again, you should feel pretty comfortable with that. We come to section 4, and now we're attaching suffixes. And you can see I have 2 columns of suffixes. On the left side, you have the suffix that attach directly to a verb. There, you're basically connecting them to a verb that's ending in, let's say, a historic long vowel. But not just a historic long vowel, but also sometimes the 3FS as put back in its protoform. In the right column, its suffixes attach with connecting vowels to the verb. So sometimes you can see those boxes, and of course the R3 letter will set in the box. But yet they need a connecting vowel in order to attach the pronominal suffix to the verb. And you can see the examples there. If you look at the footnote that I give you, it talks about the suffixes may be syllabic, and by that I mean they're a syllable. So if you look again in the left column, the 1CS is a ni. You have a consonant and a vowel. That is a syllable. But they may also be just alphabetic, and that's what you would see with a 2FS. You just have a kaf, and it's not a syllable. There's no vowel there. And so in your mind, you do want to make a distinction between, let's call a syllabic suffix and just an alphabetic. An alphabetic will always close the syllable, obviously, where the syllabic ones will always be open syllables. Now there's certain general principles that we need to look at. And one other thing, though, I want to say about those suffixes. These suffixes are not the same ones that you learned in chapter 12. In chapter 12, those suffixes are for nouns and adjectives. These are very similar to those, but you can see there are certain changes. And many of these changes you've already seen in chapter 14 with the prepositions. But again, read the text right under the listing of the suffixes for the little changes that you get. And so just keep that in mind. Now let's look at the general principles. Verbs ending in a historic long vowel, and of course that will be a 1CS because it has that hirik yod, the T. The 1CP has the nu with the shurik, that's a historic long vowel. And the 3CP, and also I say the 2FS, because remember the 2FS is also going to have that hirik yod in its protoform. And the 2MP And then notice what I say here, and the 3FS verb with syllabic suffixes will attach pronominal suffixes directly to the verb without connecting vowels. And so you can see the examples. Let me just write one of the examples here for you to look at. The word I've just written, shamaruni, is a call perfect 3CP with a 1CS suffix. Now, it's a third person, so I want you to notice, look at the accent on R3 there, as we would expect. It ends with a historic long vowel. And therefore, since there's a vowel already here, obviously the suffix doesn't need a connecting vowel. The vowel is already provided by the ending of the perfect. And therefore, that's why you're going to use the suffixes in the left column in a situation like this. Now, let's look at the next example I give you, because this time again, it's a third person. This is a call perfect 3FS, again with a 1CS attached. So again, with third persons, we want to accent the third root letter, which we have here. And remember, the protoform here would look something, this is the way the protoform would look. Shamarat, like this. And there's an implied silent schwa. But when we add the pronominal suffix, the implied silent schwa becomes no longer implied. It's an explicit schwa. Why did I put that dagesh there? Let's get that out of there. And of course, now what we do is crunch the rules. Pretonic open and then pro-pretonic, just do a reduction. But again, really, the ni is connected directly on. There is no connecting vowel. There's simply a silent schwa. And again, this is only true if you have a syllabic suffix. If you were to have one of those alphabetic, well, if you do the alphabetic one, we've got a problem. We've got a consonantal cluster, which, again, Hebrew does not appreciate at all. And so you're going to have to use with the connecting vowel. And the connecting vowel, of course, would be a sere. But now with the accent here, and this being in a closed unaccented syllable, Hebrew is going to reduce this to a sagol. And in just a moment, we're going to learn another trick with this vowel. This vowel is going to have to lengthen, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. The next general principle look at here is the remaining verbs, and that is your second masculine singular, and you can read that, with alphabetical suffixes require connecting vowels. And let me just give you the one example here. Okay, here we have a second masculine singular call perfect, and again a 1CS ending. But this word here, we're going to need a connecting vowel for the pronominal suffix to attach. And so you can see that we're going to have to use the right column of pronominal suffixes. And that's what this patach is. And this patach is simply a connector to bring on the ni to make that connect properly. All right. Now we want to go to specific problems, and then we'll look at contracted and problems of assimilation. These are the little thorny details that you've got to watch out for when you're connecting it. For your third feminine singular verb, I've already mentioned this to you, but the original patach under the third root letter will lengthen to a kametz in an open syllable. And that's exactly what we were looking at when I drew or wrote this up. Get that dagesh out of there. Okay, in this situation, the original patach, which was right here under the third root letter, lengthens to kametz in an open syllable. You can see this is clearly an open syllable. And so you're going to have to remember that detail. The lamed with the patach in the 3FS in an open syllable will lengthen to a long kametz. And so you want to keep that in mind. The second detail that you've got to watch out for is in the second masculine singular. And here the connecting vowel that goes with the suffix will replace the kametz that you're used to seeing. So you have, here is your 2ms, and when you put the suffix on, you have to take the connecting vowel and replace the kametz, which again originally was probably patach. And so there you go. That's what you want to do. So really, you could argue that this is the original vowel. That's fine. But for purposes of learning, you might just want to say, listen, the connecting vowel simply replaces the kametz. And if you do that, I think it's going to be easier for you probably. Okay, then finally you have the contracted or assimilated forms. And these can be a real problem. The first problem is with the 3ms suffix. And that suffix, of course, looks like this. And you can see it has a hey. And when you're going to have a contraction, it's when you have another vowel before the hey. Because remember, the hey between vowels can be unstable, and it sometimes will fall out. Or if you like a nice fancy term, syncopate. Okay. So we have a form like this, which is a 1CS, or one could say a second feminine singular, either way, with a 3ms ending. And you can, this is a possible answer, but also what can happen is that hey is going to drop out. And when that hey drops out, now you have two vowels back to back. And Hebrew is just not going to tolerate that. And so the shurik will actually become a vav. It will actually become a consonant. And so this is what you will get. So you have to watch out for the contraction there that happens. Okay, that's with a 3ms suffix. But there's another time. With a 3FS perfect, the hey of the suffix can this time assimilate to the feminine T of the verb. And so I give you the form written fully. This would be the form. But what happens sometimes is the hey is assimilated into the tav. And so when that happens, you're going to get, now you'll get rid of that schwa because now the shurik will sort of take that place. And this dagesh is clearly a dagesh forte, and it's representing the hey that's assimilated that you see here. We won't lengthen here now because it's not an open syllable. It's closed, it's not open, so we don't want to lengthen here in the 3FS. So we've got to watch out for this form. This can be a very difficult form for parsing and even for creating. And then number 2, the 3FS suffix. And 3FS suffix with a 3FS perfect, again we can have problems. And let's look at those problems. Okay, you have the form looking like this. And again, we've got the hey, this is the 3FS suffix. And so what can happen again is the hey is assimilating into the tav, as you see here. And then the kametz, as it were, kind of moves over into this place here. And now to alert the reader in an unpointed text, they put a phony hey there to get you to read comments there. That's a fun form right there. That'll keep you up at night. So watch out for that one. Okay, now in section 5, we want to look at actually attaching pronominal suffixes to the perfect. And we're going to follow a 4-step process. Number 1, we want to restore the protoforms. And so that'll be our first step, restoring the protoforms. That means the vowels, and then for specific forms, like, for instance, a second feminine singular, you'll have to restore that hirik yod on the end. The second step is attaching the appropriate box. So you have to know, does this ending directly attach on, or do I need a connecting suffix? So you've got to attach the appropriate suffix. And at that time also you want to establish the accent. Where is the accent on the word? And again, that's very important. Then the third step is to work the rules of syllables. And again, we'll be following the noun reduction pattern. And then the fourth step is for those problems that we have, the general principles, namely the specific problems and the contracted and assimilated forms that we looked at in section 4. Well, with that said, let's do an example of this. And so let's look at the first example, which I say a third feminine singular perfect with a second masculine singular suffix of katal. Okay, well the first thing we want to do is we want to restore the protoform. And so first I'll just draw the usual form. This is what you'd expect with a third feminine singular called perfect, but we have to restore the protoform. So the kametz obviously is going to have to go to patach. Vocal schwa goes to patach. And now we have to get rid of the phony hey. The long kametz go back to the original patach, and then go back to the original feminine t that you see there. And so there we go. That's a good start. We start with our protoform. The next thing is we're looking at a second masculine singular suffix. And with the third feminine singular, of course the second masculine singular suffix will look like this. And now we have a little problem we got to think about, because we have the third feminine singular, and sometimes they attach directly, and at other times they have to have connecting vowels. Well, if it's a syllabic suffix, and that's what we have here, that's a syllable, it will directly attach, and so the implicit silent schwa will now become explicit. Now we need to establish the accent, and we're dealing with a third person, and all third persons go here unless this were a 3ms verb with a 2ms. That would be the one exception. So we want to accent on the R3 as we have here. The next step is to crunch our rules. And so when we start crunching our rules, we have here a pretonic open, so the original patach will go to a long kametz. And then we'll take the original patach and we'll reduce it to a vocal schwa because it's in the originally open pro-pretonic syllable. One thing I do want to point out also is that's this syllable here. This is accented closed. Hebrew prefers, not requires, a long vowel, and so this is somewhat an exception to our rule that I do want to point out to you. All right. Now we want to look at section 6 of chapter 27, and that is the other stems, and by that we're talking about the PL and the HIFIL. Pronominal suffixes are rare with the nifal, and especially with the pual and hafal. Again, they're passive, so they should not be taking too many objects. They can in certain situations, but especially the hafal. But again, we're not going to worry about those. You're going to see those so rarely that there's no reason to worry about them. But we do want to look at the PL and the HIFIL. And again, the HIF-PIL would go under the PL column. When it comes to protoforms, you really don't have to worry about the boxes. Because again, when you have something like a PL, like a kitel form, this dagesh is going to ensure that the hirik is fine. There's not going to be any problem with that hirik. It's going to stay there. But here's where the problem is going to be later on that we're going to look at. We're going to reduce that thematic vowel. But otherwise, it's the same protoforms in the sense of the endings. So for instance, if we were to look at a PL, second feminine singular, something like this, again, when we're restoring the protoform, we need to bring back this hirik yod. So, but again, we will not touch this will not be touched at all because that dagesh ensures the existence of the hirik of the PL. Okay, with that said, with the PL, there's one major exception, and that is the reduction pattern. In an open pretonic syllable, the thematic vowel will reduce, whereas in the call, we're going to follow the usual noun reduction pattern, and so you would lengthen the thematic vowel from a patach to a kametz. When we get to the PL, the original thematic vowel will reduce in the open pretonic position, and so this is more like the verb reduction pattern, where the call follows more the noun reduction pattern. And so if you look at one of the examples that I give you, again, this is a 3ms PL with a 1cs ending. And you can see the accent is over R3 as with the third persons. And now the thematic vowel, the short vowel that was there, is now in a pretonic open, and so it's going to reduce, where again, if it were a call, we would lengthen that. And again, this cannot be touched because of the dagesh forte, and so this explains this form. So there's only one form that you really have to watch out for, and that one I give you. You have to watch out for this form. Your accent will be, again, over the suffix. This is a 3ms with a 2ms suffix. That's the exception, because again, Hebrew will not accent a schwa. And so this will regard again as a vocal schwa. And so you have your original vowel, whatever, probably a hirik, but you have this vowel. And now it's in the pretonic open, so we reduce it. And once we reduce that, again, we have a vocal schwa and really a political schwa. And you know Hebrew's not going to allow that. And so what's going to happen is this is going to become a segol. And so this is the one form that you do have to keep an eye on in the PL, namely a 3ms verb with a 2ms suffix. You're going to have the schwa fight. And when you finish up that schwa fight, you're going to get a segol this time under the kof. So you need to watch for that particular form. That's the one exceptional form that you have to keep your eye on. The hifil is also not very difficult at all. The proto-forms, especially at the front of the word and the thematic vowel, is never going to change for you. Because again, there's not reduction in the hifil, and that's what's very nice. No reduction in the hifil. But the protoforms, again, will apply to the endings. And so I give you an example of this with this word. Here again, we're looking at a third person. This is a third masculine singular with a 1cs suffix. So, of course, the accent will be over the kaf, the R3. And of course, we cannot reduce here. We have a historic long hirik yod. And we cannot reduce here. This is a closed, unaccented syllable. So this is a Hebrew happy word. It's okay, no reduction necessary. And so I think you're going to like the hifil, or the hifil. You're not going to have as many problems with it. So I think you'll enjoy that. Finally, look at section 7. We have parsing forms with pronominal suffixes. Here, the order is slightly different than in creating, but it's not too bad. And so let's look at the example that I give you. Here's the example. And so when we're parsing these